Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to the Monday Overreaction Show here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. Do us a solid, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Just hit that little subscribe button. It's like right down there. Do it. Push that one and the thumbs up while you're at it. Get notifications. Tell some family members. This video brought to you by RogueShop.com. The promo code is Orangebloods. If there was ever a weekend on War where some Rogue products would have helped Longhorn fans just get through the 48 hours, it was this weekend. It was this weekend.
I had to use some of the products on Sunday. I'm not going to lie.
I used some of them before we went live. Look, lots of products. Check it out. Look, go to RogueShop.com. Check out the website. You will find a plethora of things that will interest you. Try one of them. See how it goes. I guarantee you this, Richard and the guy are such good people that if you tried something and it just didn't work and you told him, he'd probably go out of his way to find something for you on his dime to take care of you. That's what they're about, taking care of people. We're going to try to take care of the people in our chat, the people watching this video today. We just got finished watching Anwar participating in Steve Sarkisian's Monday press conference. Today's going to be a day where there's a lot of the ball's on the tee for overreactions. Let's just get our initial reactions to the Monday press conference out of the way, Anwar, and then we can really start to pull the layers back with regards to reacting and maybe overreacting to what happened in Saturday in Lubbock.
So I guess as always, we'll start with the news and then we'll work our way out of that, right? So from a news standpoint, not much new as far as the Xavier Worthy update or quarterback update, which we know quarterback is going to be non-update. I mean, Steve Sarkisian admitted, when he asked about the practice thing, he said, well, everybody practiced today, but they all did practice last week, right? that was, his subtle way of don't overreact to it. As everyone was overreacting last week, right? Because last week he was saying oh, guy, they're going to suit up. Quinn's going to suit up. And it's we're trying to say hey, that doesn't really mean anything. Suiting up and playing are two different things. And then there's a guy who watched him warm up last on Saturday, and then maybe you caught some of the film of that. If not, it's on Orangebloods. He was only throwing 2 passes, and both of them were kind of soft tosses. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets back for this game or not. The Xavier Worthy, like I said, he went to the day-to-day thing, which therefore, a little bit elusive. Did ask him about Troy Amiri. Just wanted to throw that out there. I was a little bit surprised because I thought Troy Amiri was coming along a little bit more, and he kind of just pushed that back a little bit, which made me think that Troy Amiri is nowhere close to being ready at this moment. So that was a little bit surprised. So that was kind of the news portion of it. And and you want to react to that before we start getting into some other stuff, we can go there. But what did you think about that portion, or nothing?
No, I had thoughts.
Okay.
Boy, at some point you'd like the words, "We think Quinn Ewers is getting closer and closer," to come out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, quite frankly, it's the kind of thing his fan base needs to hear. I mean, be deceptive about it if you want to, right? But because it sounded exactly the way it did a week ago, and there was nothing there that indicated that they were in any other position other than the one they were in last week. You can be deceptive about who your starting quarterback is and say, we think Quinn's going to take more work this week with the team than he has in the past, and we'll see where it goes. There's so little was said that there was just a part of me that went, huh, maybe nothing, but there was, given the way it's unfolded the last couple of weeks, it's lack of being even slightly different made me think it's kind of maybe more of the same this week, which would, I think, be problematic in a number of different ways. They can't force Quinn Ewers to play before he's ready, but boy, I think we're still a week away from OU week, but there's a big question to be had about if we get to OU and Ewers hasn't played since the first quarter of Alabama. Do we take out the guy who started and played the last 15 quarters of football? I think I would, but boy, it's not it's not like as cut and dry as I think a lot of Quinn Ewers needs reps, needs to be playing. That game is a hell of a game to throw a guy back in when he's just been sitting on the sideline for a week. So there's a Quinn Ewers conversation to be had some point on War, but there's a reason why a lot of people have been pointing to this West Virginia game at the very least and saying, I think that might just be that confirmation bias kicking in. Because like the implications if he doesn't, what it might mean. And it's just not a good thing. So I think everybody they're trying to hope so bad that Ewers comes back, let's say this weekend, because they know that it really is something that from a best case scenario needs to take place.
Yeah. I mean, like the one thing when you start thinking about catch like this weekend and what happens with Xavier, right? And him being a little elusive about Xavier probably isn't the best sign. He seems to be that our sign seems to be when Sarkisian is elusive about a guy, that's probably not a good thing. Like that's probably your tip off, right? Because he had no problem saying Moro Jomo practice today, he was back, right? So, but when we start going to day to day, because that's what started us a couple of weeks ago when he started going day to day, and everyone overreacted with Quinn. They were like, Quinn's day to day. We tried to tell you, okay, that don't really mean anything. Like we all are day to day. And so, and I remember saying at that time, Catch, I remember saying you could be the day to day for several weeks. And we are doing that for, several weeks. So, I know, Charles, I know you say Quinn doesn't play, defense, but I think there's an argument to be had that when you look at the offensive productivity, especially in the second half, some of that is we'll get into some of that's play calling, but some of that is also, the ineffectiveness of moving the ball and what that entails. And so there's a little bit of both. And so having you can't deny having your number one quarterback is probably a good thing for you and a good thing for your offense. But yeah, the fact that you feel like if he was getting close, he probably start getting into some specifics as relates to the QB situation. But the fact when he's like, I mean, they all practiced. I told you that last week. It's almost him telling you like, yeah, you might want to get ready for another dose of Hudson Card and what that may potentially look like. Which, by the way, without Xavier and you're down another receiver, like that portion gets a little bit scary.
Yeah, I mean, when Nair went down, one of the things we said immediately was you're one injury away from going from an elite level wide receiving room to one that's a bit sketchy and questionable. And I thought the coaches were confused on Saturday with what to do. Do we have Whittington inside? Do we move him outside? They were rotating suddenly after not, you haven't rotated receivers at all through the first 3.5 games of the season. And then it was rotation city. And I get it. They were trying to figure out who and where needed to be on the field to help move the offense along. And the fact that the offense couldn't stay on the field didn't allow them to get into a flow. I thought the Worthy thing today was the top. For me, it's kind of a throwaway because he just said he's day-to-day and didn't say a lot. But he indicated that Worthy wasn't at practice today because he said we'll get him back later in the week and he's day-to-day. I was uh-oh for me.
Because you know what he talks about. You just said it the other week. You pointed out he don't want to play guys who haven't practiced all week long coming off of injuries.
Well, if I really thought, I remember just a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, Bijan with the shoulder took it easy on him early in the week. He ends up being okay. So maybe Xavier Worthy's going to be perfectly fine on Saturday. He did not come out and say Xavier's fine. He said Xavier we expect him back later in the week. He's day to day, but that's a little bit like the quarterbacks. At this point, when he says you're day to day, that could mean you're wearing a green injured jersey and you're just getting training, medical training on the sideline with the rest of the injured guys that you're just going through medical therapy. It doesn't mean that you're playing. It means Quinn has dressed for the last 2 games and has been day to day. It hasn't meant a lot. I'm not screaming fire in a crowded theater as it relates to Xavier Worthy at this point. Like, I think even just observers of the program hope he gets back as soon as possible. He is one of the most fun players in college football to watch when he's able to do his thing. So I don't feel like a fan and saying, hopefully he's back. Like I wish nothing but success for the guy and the ability to stay healthy. But I had many alarm bells going off about the genericness of the answer with regards to Xavier Worthy. It'll be something we have to watch all week.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say, obviously we'll see who steps up, because the interesting part about that, Xavier prior to the injury probably hasn't been that dude that we saw all of last year. Like if you just kind of go through the numbers, catch, we're talking about 2 receptions for 24 yards against Louisiana Monroe, 5 for 97 versus Alabama, but then 4 for 41 versus UTSA, and then 3 for 50 before his injury that occurred, but he basically doesn't play like the second half. So, even before then, from a statistical standpoint, he wasn't having that output that we saw last season. But then, it's in him somewhere. And then you just figure to yourself, okay, it's just a matter of time before it happens. At least that's what your thought and hope. But yeah, there's going to have to be other guys that step up. All the guys that we heard about, which is why I love off-season stories, and that's such a air quote thing that I put out there. For all that we've heard about the guys in the offseason, that were supposed to be making this progress and having all this impact, it's probably time to start hearing from that, right? Where is the Brendan Thompsons of the world, the Savion Reds, like all the things that, we were hearing. Well, if you're down another receiver and you need speed, because God knows you're going to need some speed in these games, this is where you may have to start hearing from those guys a little bit more.
I really don't have it. It's funny. You and I have been doing these shows now, creeping up on more than a year and a half. And I feel like 9 out of 10 shows, I feel like I act like I know everything that I'm talking about. Like I'm pretty much a smart ass a lot of times. When it comes,
okay,
hey,
there's a setup. I want to know where we're going.
I was going to say, I said it. You don't need to follow it up with hammer now. But if we're talking about the wide receiver position on Saturday and Xavier Worthy doesn't play, I have no idea what the right call is there. I mean, personally, I think you leave Whittington inside and you got to figure it out on the outside, whether that's a Jai Hall or Casey Kane or whomever. But it just didn't look like they knew who they were and who they wanted to be in the passing game. And if Xavier can't play and Whittington is the only guy from really the three, I guess Casey Kane has played a lot of snaps, but he's not. His usage in the passing game is minimal. I don't know where that production and where that threat comes from. Like I hear you, and you may be right when you say like, hey, maybe this is where we've got to take the seal off of maybe a guy like Brennan Thompson, because you have to have somebody that threatens the defense over the top to keep them honest. But in general, I don't know who the right 3 guys would be based on what's happened so far this season, which is them primarily playing 3 guys and not trusting anybody else. Now you have to play the guys that you haven't trusted to get on the field, and it just leaves me with uncertainty with regards to answering the question of who should play, who can they count on, who's the deep target, who, if Jordan Whittington is player 1 at wide receiver and then maybe Sanders is player 2, who is the guy after that? I don't have any answers at all.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. This is Paige and Brendan Marion, Mr. Cowboy Hat himself. Like this is going to be your wheelhouse here. And I think this is where, this is where when you're a new assistant, everyone loves you, right? Everybody loves you until you don't get enough productivity in your room. And that's when things start to take a turn for you a little bit. And so in a position that a group that many people thought was really deep going into the season with as long with the running back room, now all of a sudden like standing out. But this is like you said, this is the Ajay Hall thing, like where you got to call on Ajay and say, all right, buddy, this is what we brought you here from Alabama. This is what the promises were about. This is where, now here's your time. This is your opportunity.
We told you were going to get a chance.
And here it is.
Here it
And
is.
here it is. Here it is. Same thing for you, Tariq Milton. We told you you would get a chance, and and here it is. Like, these are now, like, to your point, the guys you're starting to lean on, the Casey Kane to the world. Like, but to me, when you start thinking of impact, because and of course Jordan Whittington, which you don't want to overlook him, even though, gosh, we had, I think, Jordan in our thing on Saturday with, as far as his receptions were concerned. He had 4 going into halftime, and you told yourself, okay, one more, and he's going to get that over, and then didn't have another reception in the second half. So, what that passing game looks like, especially for Hudson Card, like what that passing game looks like. Do they have to lean on Bijan a little bit more in the passing game? And does he have to be kind of a weapon? Like, injuries are starting to pile up a little bit, but in that room, more so than anyone, you've got to have some guys that are really ready to step up. And that to me looks like a Jai Hall special.
As far as the rest of the press conference goes, I suppose we can always come back to it. There wasn't, I think the thing that stood out the most, and we got some super chat questions as well. Here, we'll hit this one real quick from Chris Harrington. My humble opinion, Sark needs some help at game management when we are on offense. Thoughts? Chris, hold that thought. I got like 19 overreactions. I promise you, Sark and his game management is a big part of maybe my number one overreaction. Like, I've got a few that I'm just kind of dying to get into. I will come back to that, Chris. Just sit tight. It was a little surprise. First of all, the press conference was short. He was on time today, but he only went 20 minutes as opposed to the full half hour. Sometimes they'll try to cheat it by 5 minutes here or there. Today he was out of there at 10. He started at 11:02 and was out of there at 11:22. Don't think I didn't notice, Sark. No one, not one person in that room asked about Pete Kwiatkowski and just general faith, confidence, what needs to happen from here on the defensive side of the ball. I have not been to Orangebloods since the press conference ended, although maybe I'll do that here in a second. But if I was a fan sitting at home, I would have been like, how the hell could not one person in that press corps not ask about, quite frankly, the number one talking point, not named quarterbacks or Xavier Worthy's injuries? I mean, there are a lot of people that want Pete Kwiatkowski fired. And people are getting mad at me because I was like, yeah, I just don't think you fire him right now. But that a single question wasn't asked about the head of the defensive food chain, I thought was a bit curious today, because it is a thing that will dominate discussions in the public.
It's a good one. There was a lot of other questions that were asked outside of that one, but you're right. The Pete K thing probably ends up being a big topic, and maybe that's something that, if this continues, it has to be something that either I ask him on Thursday or maybe Monday of next week, because without Brian Davis here, I mean, we're going to run out of people trying to throw heaters. We just got a lot of knuckleballers that are coming out here, so and a lot of underhand pitches too, but. Yeah, the PK thing becomes when we start looking at this team, and even 2 games this year where this team has had leads heading into the fourth quarter. There was a 13-17 lead at this at some point in the third quarter, and then of course the lead that they had against Bama. And then, of course, going back to last year, there's seems to be themes, right? Which is, this defense, starts to fold as the game goes on. It starts to fold in the fourth quarter if you just keep applying the pressure to them. And then the mental errors, kind of, come back and just the lack of discipline, and converting on 3rd and 26, but you just got a choice of what mental error would you like to capitalize on, and then are they doing enough to limit and stop certain things that are are occurring, the adjustment, so yeah, the PK thing becomes a huge question going forward. Not only going forward, seemingly it's been on the table, but when you have a loss like this, kind of gets magnified. I think the pounding of the table probably gets at an all-time high if this defense doesn't look good against West Virginia.
Yeah, and I guess where I'm coming from on how best to approach that situation if you're in the media, Sark's pretty open about self-evaluation of himself after a game, and then he stands in front of us and will tell us, I think I could have done this better. It's one of the things I like most about Sark is he has always seemed pretty open about after a game evaluating himself and then being available and open to talk about it in front of the media. That's not easy to do. He's doing that on offense. Clearly, Kwiatkowski's doing that on defense. So convey to us as best as you can the conversations that are taking place between him and you and your defensive coordinator about the things that need to get better in game, before the game. Like, what are you guys specifically needing to do? Because what we mostly hear Sark say is, I think we're better. And, that just doesn't do a lot for me. I mean, it's not untrue, but it also doesn't address, I think, a concern that people have that the things that I was talking about last week on defense are definitely existing issues that this weekend made me a bit of a prophet with pointing out, like, this team has a hard time getting off the field. This team's just kind of average in a lot of important areas. This team doesn't have playmakers. There are only 2 teams in the country that have forced fewer turnovers than Texas. So I think there are questions of Sark to be asked of Kwiatkowski that don't have to sound like, are you going to fire your guy? That's not fair. I mean, I think you and I both believe was it a good game? No, it was a bad game. But it's week 4. You guys loved him for 3 games. Loved him. And then they had a bad game, and it's like, oh, fire the guy. And it's like, well, no, everybody deserves a little more slack than that, or you shouldn't have let that guy come back in the first place.
Sure.
If it is one of these, first sign of bad times, I'm going to replace the guy. That was a sign you needed to replace the guy before then, because you're just waiting to do the difficult thing at that point. But I think that it's a fascinating game on Saturday on War, because it does feel like Texas has a lot of areas that you would like to see get better. So on Saturday against West Virginia, like, which of those areas do we see improvement in, and which areas do we not? And then going into OU, what does the conversation sound like around those things?
The challenging part about that, Catch, and I've been doing this for 25 years or so. You've been doing it for probably about the same. So everybody, probably like 50 plus years of experience in this business. It is hard to improve in the middle of a season. Like, it's hard. Like, we will talk about the areas that you need to improve in. This team needs to improve in. Those improvements usually occur in the off season. It's so hard to get it so much better going forward, because it's about game planning. It's not, you don't have time to teach technique at this point. You don't have time to really get into the intricacies of, okay, you need to do this. Like, there's not a lot of time to do that. All that time, the stuff that your dad needs dramatic improvement has to be, in the winter, has to be in the spring, has to be in the summer, has to be in training camp. So when you start getting into the season, you might be able to hide a couple of things here and there, but for the most part, you are who you are. And that's the thing. So sure, there's, now can he just do something different from a game planning perspective? Absolutely. Like, look, if you want to go glass half full, you can tell yourself, well, at the end of the day, they lost to overtime, right? You can tell yourself at the end of the day, it was a close loss against Alabama. So you can tell yourself, like, as bad as things may have been, you can tell yourself, hey, it was right there. The problem is, no one's supposed to feel great about close losses. And the problem is, this team has had leads that they've given up. And the problem is, we saw a defense that regressed back to a defense that none of us thought was really good last season. And we saw that step back. So yeah, there's going to ultimately, I think this, this will come down to the coaching. This will come down to the coaching to be able to figure out the answers, to put their guys in the best places to succeed. Because without that, that's when the struggle bus starts to take off.
All right, let's get into some overreactions here on the Monday Overreaction Show. Brought to you by RogueShop.com, promo code Orangebloods. Again, just go check out the website. Trust me, you'll find something that you're curious about, and use the promo code and let your curiosity find its way. Anwar and I, strong endorsers of the product.
Yes.
Simple
Needed
as that.
some road.
After a
Go
weekend
ahead.
like this.
Oh,
All
yeah.
right.
That was Sunday all night.
Your fantasy team would make me smoke all day, man. And we play each other this week, so you're going to break out of your slump against me.
Jerry Jeudy is killing me. Every guy, second straight week, I put a captain on a guy who gets hurt early in the game. Just shoot my team. Like it's
Anwar's Monday overreaction is fuck a bunch of fantasy football.
Just F that. I'm all about daily fantasy at this point, because this is getting absolutely effing ridiculous with my team. And and how was I supposed to know that my tight end Njoku would go off on Thursday Night Football? Like, how was I even supposed to know that? My team is so freaking complex right now.
I did not know that when I poked that hornet's nest that 1,000 hornets would come flying out mad.
That's another reason for the Rogue products. But yes, continue.
It does help with that. Okay, so look, I've got like 15 overreactions. Some of them are maybe too hot for this crowd, because I don't think this crowd's quite. Look, a week ago they were mad at me for having the audacity to say, the defense can be better. Do you want to go first? Do you have one that you're dying to get out? Because I have.
I want catch going wild is what I want.
Well, I've got the biggest one, I think. Boy, I've got a bunch of them. Let me just start with kind of what I wrote about this weekend, which is Sark's not doing a good enough job yet as head coach of the University of Texas. This isn't about them being 2-2. This is about them being 7-9 through 16 games. This is about the offense going into funks after Sarkisian's early script is out the door, and he's so good off that script early in the game. And then, it stops. It stopped on Saturday. And I know some of that you can say was Xavier Worthy, but there's 16 games of this. I mean, even with Worthy in the game, you'd be worried about this thing happening again. This team's ability to close out games in the fourth quarter, for Joey McGuire to come out and say after the game to his team, to be fair, I don't know that he meant for the entire world to hear this, but he told his team at halftime, these guys will break in the fourth quarter. And it is kind of the MO of the Steve Sarkisian program, is to get to Saturday. If it was just Saturday, those things that happens from time to time. It's happened a lot to Steve Sarkisian at this point. The ability to play well on the road, that's on Sark. His team didn't come out ready to play last week against UTSA. His team didn't come out and play well enough to close a game against a pretty average team. That is on Sark. Not consistently beating Power 5 programs. That is on Sark. And having a team that in pressure situations constantly beats itself, yeah, you point to the players and say things like, you can't jump off sides on 3rd and 26 or 3rd and 13. You can't commit penalties. You can't do these things. Good coaches, great coaches, that doesn't happen to their teams. Didn't happen to Joey McGuire's team on Saturday. And when you add all of that up together, it's not good enough. And someone asked me in a buy or sell question on Orangebloods, like made me for like, yes or no, Sark is here at the end of 4 years. Man, I don't know how anybody can say while the team is 7-9 through the first 16 games, and I don't know where exactly this team is headed over the next 8. I don't know how anybody definitively could say, yes, this thing's going to end in massive success. And real quick, and it won't be real quick, I think my biggest problem with Sarkisian in the totality of it all isn't that he can't follow up the script on offense in the second half of games. When teams make adjustments, he's not making adjustments, although that's part of it. It's not that his team gives up in the second half, that other teams feel like the word on this team last year onward, we talked about it over and over again. Take Texas into deep waters, and in the fourth quarter, they'll drown. That's still the MO. That's literally what Joey McGuire said to his team after the game. My problem, one of my biggest with Sarkisian, is that I don't think from a game management standpoint in games, I don't think he's much better than Charlie Strong. I mean, I don't see in games Steve Sarkisian doing things that makes his team better. In fact, it's the opposite. In games, the longer the game goes, the more worrisome and troublesome it gets for Texas. And a strong head coach, that doesn't happen to. Texas Tech played its best football of that game late in the game. I can't really tell you when that's ever happened under Steve Sarkisian. I mean, what they're 1-7 in their last 8 Big 12 games or whatever it is, like, it's a situation where he just has to, and this isn't about recruiting. He's a great recruiter. This isn't about him being well-liked. He's well-liked. This isn't about having players that play for him. He's got players that play for him. This is about him just doing a better job. And it's the same thing that we said of Charlie. Everybody liked Charlie. But at some point when the lights come on, you have to do things in the 60 minutes that are being played that make your team better, that get them through games. And I just don't see that from Steve Sarkisian. And it makes you start to think like, hey, well, this is his 9th season. How many seasons does a head coach need before those areas start to become a strength, if they ever do? I know there will be people in the chat that think I'm being too hard, to think that I'm just, trying clickbait, whatever. But part of what happened on Saturday was Texas has a football team whose head coach can't help carry the team through tough moments. And it's been that way now for 16 games. He can't survive in this job if that doesn't turn around. If we don't get to a point where we say Texas is winning Big 12 championships because Steve Sarkisian's in games is among the best in the country at his craft. That's what we say about the best coaches in college football. I've yet to really feel that way about Steve Sarkisian, and it stuck out on Saturday. That was a game where the team was feeling some adversity, and Sarkisian needed to have a rabbit in his bag. And instead, there were no rabbits. And on Monday, we hear things like, well, the Wildcat formation has a lot of versatility to it and variety. And it's like, well, that would have been helpful on Saturday when this team needed something. It needed to stay on the field on offense. It needed someone to make a play on defense. It needed a coaching twist or tweak that would help this team get out of it. And it didn't happen. And it's the single most troubling thing I find myself watching week in and week out with this program. When they play good competition, last sentence, I'm not talking about the UTSAs and the La Monroes of the world. I'm talking about teams that don't have to get paid $2 million or $1.5 million to come play a game. When they play those types of teams, I think Sarkisian has had one win since he's been here. Like that's not all on the players.
Oh, are you done?
I'm done.
Because that's just no. I didn't mean that sarcastically, by the way. I just wanted to make sure because I was typing out one last thing because you said so much and you got my brain working, and so I've been writing down a bunch of different things. Catch when you first of all everything you said, would agree with. Let me just kind of build on that, right, and kind of maybe add to it. When you talk about the Joey Maguire thing, I'll start there, right? With that MO when he says, "I told you they were going to break." That, why he felt that way, and the evidence of that is that guy said, "I don't give a damn about kicking or punting. We're just going to keep going for it." That's a guy who has said, "We're just going to keep punching this team in the mouth. We will just keep going after them and after them." And yeah, catch if they punt one time, they probably lose. Maybe two of those punts, they probably lose 8 times. That's a guy who said to himself, just keep attacking this team. Eventually it'll fold. Now, look, I will give Texas credit because at the end of the day, they still did come back in the fourth quarter and did have a great drive. So someone could say, well, all right, Joey, you were just saying that because Texas actually did come back and tie it up and send it into overtime. But then, of course, we know what happened in overtime. But to your point is that even to get to that point, it was 31-17, and they just kept chipping away and chipping away and chipping away and chipping away, and eventually got to where they wanted to go. To what your point is, catch what when we start thinking about the Sarkisian thing, right? This team is 1-5 in road games under Sark. The only victory he has right now is the TCU game from last year. And then outside of that, it's losses against Arkansas, Baylor, Iowa State, West Virginia, and now Texas Tech this year. That's 1-5, catch. And then when we start talking about the overall record of 7-9, catch, 4 of those wins are against non-Power 5 schools. We're talking about Louisiana. We're talking about Rice. Then we're talking about this year with UTSA and Lima Monroe. Yeah. So 4 of the 7 are against non-Power 5. So if you can't eliminate that, but then that means the only other 3 are against Power 5 programs. That's not cutting it. That's not going to get it done. Back to when you talk about the opening script, I thought Kurt had a really good question because he asked him about Keelan Robinson. He had so much success in the first, in that first drive. What happened? And then he basically said, without saying, but basically like, yeah, that was part of the opening script. And then he went away with it. And to your point, in adjustments, when you see something like, whoa, no matter what I have written down, this is working. So now this is working. Let's just stay with this, for however it takes. This is the hot hand. Let's keep going. Didn't do that. And so what we're seeing, Catch, is, let me just bring up 2 more things. What we're seeing is when it comes to like the adjustment portion of it, we're seeing other teams adjust and we are seeing this team not. And where I would just want to agree with you is that we've got to get to the point where we're excusing lack of wins just because you're a fan of the team. It's an easy thing to excuse. Well, there's injuries that are starting to mount up. That there's one excuse. He's just got to get in his players. There's another excuse. Like there's a lot of different things you can point to and say like, hey, this to excuse what you're seeing. But the thing that I'm going to go back to is kind of what I wrote a little bit on Sunday. Catch, we have seen 2 coaches over the last 3 years or so that have been able to find success pretty instantly with what we would consider to be less talent, right? We would say Dave Aranda with Baylor would on paper have technically less talent. Now I know you'll get into the 3-4 and there's not a huge difference in that, but we could say, and it's fairly, but even if it's not a talent, we can say they inherited programs that were in far worse shape than a program that Steve Sarkisian has inherited. We can talk about Dave Aranda and what they did in year 1 and then what he did in year 2. And now we can look at Kansas, where we can say, I can't think of too many more programs that are D1 that probably were in worse shape than Kansas. Like that program, that's a place that you just got a Power 5 offer and you just say, I just want to play good football, so I guess I'll go there. Like it wasn't like, you know what, I was choosing between Kansas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and I was just like, man, I gotta go to Kansas. Like that, those kids didn't have those kind of offers, and we see that team at 4-0. It's what good coaches do. And so what Steve Sarkisian has to do is do what he's been hired to do, which is find a way to win these games where you're viewed as a good coach, because other guys are doing it in this conference. And we're seeing it, year after year. And we're still talking about, well, what does Texas need to do? Well, that's not a good situation to be in. And even if you want to talk about injuries, just don't forget Texas Tech operated with a backup quarterback, and a backup quarterback who you say, to borrow your phrase, was giving away candy, giving away turnovers like Halloween candy, and Texas couldn't generate one.
At 8:15 at night.
just dumping it in. Just like, hey, man, whatever you want, man. I can't put all this candy back in the house. So there is a portion of things that Steve Sarkisian has to get better in order for the season to go the way that, Texas fans want it to go.
Yeah, Billy Bird says in the super chat, by the way, thanks for the contribution.
Oh, that's a huge contribution.
We do not casually, accept it and not believe me, the thanks is there. Defenses will improve when the offense stops going 3 and out on repeat mode. Yeah, man. Billy, you're right. And here's the thing, and then we can move on to some other overreactions and talk about other things. Saturday night, look, it's funny because in our Slack channel, some of the communications between the Orangebloods people, it's real easy, I think, to look at Joey McGuire and call him a high school coach. It's what he's been. He's been a high school head coach with a lot of success. I mean, he's been an assistant coach and not even really a coordinator at that. I mean, he's more of a guy behind the scenes. And yet here he is in a big game against Texas, and there's no, I need my players. There's no excuses. And he won't coach every game this season like he coached against Texas. Some would say it was reckless. For me, it felt like a head coach that knew exactly what needed to be done in order for his team to win that game. And by God, as the head coach, he was going to sell out with that means of doing the only approach he thought was possible to win. I don't watch Texas and Steve Sarkisian in football games and sense that from a game management, Sarkisian is lifting his team with decision-making approach. I know it's hard on him. He's the offensive play caller as well, so there's a lot of stuff going on. And someone in the Super Chat asked earlier, let me see if I can even go back and find that question. Well, I don't see it. But somebody asked the question of, does Sark need to put somebody kind of in charge of game management while he's coaching the offense? Because it is two very distinct things to have to do at the same time. Well, the bottom line is Sarkisian's an incredibly smart guy who is very successful in a lot of ways. But the games count more than anything. And I don't care what anybody says. 8-4 will be a good season this year, yes, but only because last season was 5-7 disaster. This team didn't suck when he took over. Tom Herman had this team in the pretty good range. They won bowl games every year. They finished with their highest ranking in a decade. A couple of years before that, they played in the Sugar Bowl. Tom Herman at Texas was like the Hall of pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. Steve Sarkisian right now is giving Charlie Strong a run for his money for worst record in the history of the program. And I roll my eyes when I hear people say things like, well, he just had to tear it down. No, he didn't. Joey McGuire hasn't torn down Texas Tech. The guy at Kansas State didn't tear it down to the ground. You coach, you do your thing, you do your job, you figure out, you make your team better. And the reality is Tom Herman was fired for, Well, a lot of different reasons. Some of them recruiting related, to be fair. But he was pretty good. He was so much better than Steve Sarkisian early on that people would die right now. People would be giving their arms or their legs or at least a pinky toe if they were winning at a level that Tom Herman was winning at Texas. He was hired to take Texas to a level higher than Tom Herman because Tom Herman, everybody views just pretty good. This isn't it. And I don't know, this whole good coaches make their teams better. Great coaches make their teams better. I have yet to see him be great, and they are paying him to be great. The expectation is to be great. It needs to start sooner rather than later, or we know how this ends.
I mean, 100 catch. I mean, and like to your point, like and people, even if you don't want Herman back, you would take the records right now. Like, forget the person. You would take the overall result of saying this is a competitive team that would rise up when it's time to play the elite competitions and finish with, 8 wins. Like, you would take 8 happily. Don't forget, when you talk about the team that was inherited, it was a 7-win team that also had USF and Kansas, a really bad Kansas program taken off of its schedule. This is almost a 9-win team, probably without the COVID situation. But at the end of the day, that's what's, catch the only victories that are going to matter are going to be the ones that he gets on the field, and all the other things are not going to matter. Like the recruiting stuff is going to be great, but we've seen coaches recruit well here. Charlie recruited well here. Did you recruit as well on the offensive line or defensive line? No one has done that. You got to give them credit, for that. But people won't care as much about the victories in December in recruiting rankings, right? People are not going to care about who you get in February. People want to know, like, hey, are you going to win now? Like, that's what they're going to care about, and everything else will not be matter. It'll just be window dressing to the overall point of what people want to have. Like, they want to get to the Big 12 championship. They don't want to be talking about rebuilds when there are programs out there that are getting guys coming in, and no one's talking about a rebuild. No one's talking about a retool. You start getting into rebuild is when you start working on a project catch and you start messing up. And then all of a sudden you at that point where you just keep messing up on this project and keep doing little things. And that all of a sudden you're like, I guess I just got to start over from scratch, right? But that wasn't the goal. It was just to paint a couple of little things. It was just paint and do some touch-up paint, and then you crossed over the line on one side, and you said, okay, well, let me try to even it out over here, and then you crossed over a little bit more. Next thing you know, you're like, I got to redo the whole wall. That's what happens when you get into a situation like that. Is what was supposed to be a touch-up, taking good to great. And now it's like, well, we'll tear it down and rebuild it. And here's the thing, Catch, and I think this is important. When you talk about the immediacy of this year, what needs to occur, next year could be more of a rebuild than anything else, because next year you're talking about no Bijan Robinson. Next year you're probably talking about no Roshan Johnson, and who's going to be in that backfield. Next year there's no Jordan Whittington, right? And then you got to figure out who's going to step up from a receiver. And this is Tariq Milton's last year too, correct?
Yeah.
So you're talking about like what happens from there. You're going to lose a lot of guys who are on the defense. That no matter what, they're starters. No matter how you feel about them, this coaching staff has identified them as the best options available. So what does that look like come next year? So is it as simplistic as if Quinn comes back, everything is back to normal? We hope. I hope. It would be great if that's all that's it. That's all it entails. But Quinn ain't, back to Charles's point from earlier, Quinn ain't playing defense, and those things have to matter. Quinn's not calling plays, and those adjustments need to occur. And look, Alabama is not coming again until next year, so you're going to have to find yourself getting up for everybody else on your schedule, and you're going to find a way to have success against some really good coaches. Like there's some really good coaches who've been in this game for a long period of time, and to call Joey McGuire simplistically a high school coach, while it's simplistic in nature, I mean, Joe McGuire is pretty damn accomplished. Like he is pretty damn good at what he does, and we've seen it, and we've seen it right away, right instantaneously. Like, oh, again, this is what good coaching does. This is what good coaches do. They come in, they find a way, and they know what they're doing, and they hit the ground running, and they're not necessarily asking the same questions in year 2 as you were asking in year one, because I'll say this and let you jump back because I want to hear more of your overreactions. Being compared to what some may view as one of the worst coaches in Texas football history is, as an understatement, hell ain't a good thing. What else you got?
Okay, I think for just a second your connection wasn't great. Hey, let's knock out our super chats real quick before there's like 20 of them stacked up on top of each other, and then it's just like super chat city.
Pay the bills.
Apostle T says the unfortunate thing is the majority of Sark losses have come at the hands of Hudson Card as his quarterback. There it is. You nailed it, Apostle T.
Wait a second. Hold on, Apostle. Wait a second. No. He only played in 2 games last year. And then that was Casey at that point. It wasn't until no, that's not correct. That's not correct.
I mean, come on.
No, Apostle, first of all, love the name. But
yes.
No, they were 1-1 last year with Card, and then Card didn't come into Bama, so you can't really put Bama on him. So we'll all be talking about his UTSA, and then this game. So Card is, what is he, like 2-2 as a starter under Sark? Like that's so no. Let's not go there.
You're reaching, my man, but I appreciate you contributing in the super chat. Keenan or CJ Keenan says Steve Sarkisian is starting to become the Scott Frost of the South. That's hardcore. I am not co-signing on that.
Someone sent me that text message. It wasn't Keenan, but someone actually texted that to me
that's
over the weekend.
That is not what you want if you're Steve Sarkisian and start having that comparison made.
Yeah, someone I got that exact text. I was like, "Ooh, that's a little rough." Scott was brutal. I don't know if we're at that point yet.
Overweight lovers like anyway Sark can be replaced and retained as our OC and have GP elevated.
Come on, overweight. Stop.
No.
Stop.
No, that's not possible.
You don't pay a guy $6 million to be an OC.
You pay to be the head coach and the OC, and then there are implications about how much quality is inside of both of those things.
I think he's playing with that question.
Jake says slight overreaction. No matter how well Card plays, he will never be able to play well enough to accumulate the excitement Ewers generates by just being on the roster. Same thing will happen with Malik Murphy and Arch. Okay. I mean, I'm not sure where the question is going, but you're probably right. No, there's nothing that Card will ever be able to do that's going to make people forget that Quinn Ewers, unless Quinn Ewers fails. And yeah, Malik's probably got that issue with Arch. Those guys have to be better because there's an anticipation of these other players to get on the field and play that those guys can't control unless they are absolutely fan-freaking-tastic.
One thing he could do is look like an all-star. I mean, like that would have people excited. But I think when people kind of know what to expect, which is going to be, good play, but not great. And
I have a smoking hot Hudson Card take ready to go in just a second.
All right, let's get through the super chats and then hold that one.
Smoking hot. Ewers brings a life to the second half offense. I mean, that's just confirmation bias talking. Maybe. But I don't think that's something that you can just automatically assume. I don't discount it because I think Quinn Ewers is an amazing talent. I just don't know. I think we're in dangerous territory if the answer for everybody is Quinn Ewers will do it. It's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, Quinn Ewers needs Steve Sarkisian to be, and same thing with Hudson Card. He needs their head coach to be doing things that also create life to the offense and doesn't just rely on a player that's played 4 quarters in his career to be the guy that is responsible for that. That feels unfair to Ewers, even if you're not trying to be unfair, and even if you could be right. But boy, I think there's a lot of hope in there and not a lot of it's proven to be true. Last super chat, and then we'll get to some hot overreactions. This time from, what does that say? Overton Films. The Denver Broncos head coach the Denver Broncos HC brought in a game manager to help him. Should Sarkisian do the same? Did Gary Patterson travel to Lubbock? Did you see Gary in Lubbock?
I did see him in Lubbock. Actually, I did see him in Lubbock.
There you go.
So yeah, he was there. He was on the sidelines. Yes, so he was there. Boy, we're talking about bringing in game managers.
That's the most insulting thing. That most head coaches would be furiously upset and insulted at the idea that it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're at that point where that's, now we got to bring in a game manager to help him do certain things. Now, I mean, you got bigger problems at that point. You're getting huge problems because essentially you have to admit that your guy can't coach it on his own, and he can't coach, offense or defense on his own, lead a team on his own, and that in its whole thing. While I get it what they did in the pros, but in the pros, you do a lot of things that that's fine. You can't do that here. Can't do that here.
The last straw for Sark, I think, won't be bringing in a game manager. It would be in like year 4 or 5 if he's still there and it's not getting over the hump. He'll have already fired a defensive coordinator by then. He can't fire himself. The last resort would be bringing in an OC to call plays and allow him just to focus on the team, which is what Herman wanted to do, right? And then Herman learned the hard way. Like, no, dude, they want you. They want you because that's what you're the expert in. Sarkisian is supposed to be the expert on offense, and I think generally he is. But it's not working to the point where we get to that level where it's like, okay, we've exhausted all other things. Now we're going to bring in Graham Harrell, or I don't know, I don't know who that guy would be in a couple. But yeah, no.
The bots came, man. It's usually right around this mark too. There must be something that indicates the bots. But yes, guys, if you're looking for
I'll take care of that adult dating site.
Dating site, don't click on it.
They're gone.
They
so horny.
Okay, what you got? Smoking hot.
We love you long time in the chat.
Speaking of smoking hot.
All right, you ready for an overreaction?
Hell yeah.
So here's the thing about Hudson Card. He ain't good enough yet. You agree with that, right, Anwar? I mean, he's a 141 passer at this point, not against great competition. I will not look into the chat to see what.
Jackie McCardle said computer love. And if you know anything about Roger and Zap, that is why I laughed out loud. I'm so sorry. It was hilarious.
No worries.
Okay.
But Hudson Card, just a pretty good player at this point. Pretty good, I think is okay. That's not quite good, and that's definitely not very good. Pretty good is average-ish.
Good, yeah. I won't say pretty good. Good.
Yet on Saturday, that end of the game stretch when the team had like 21 seconds and he makes a series of plays that gets Texas in field goal position. You think about the third quarter drive where on 2 separate occasions he steps up into the pocket in the face of pressure, but has a feel for where he needs to be to make a throw that felt like something we would not have seen from him a year ago. Here's my hot overreaction. If Steve Sarkisian had stayed with Hudson Card last season and let him go through the bumps and bruises, it was a 5-7 season, so it was a throwaway anyway. if you let Hudson Card go through the bumps and the bruises and you let him grow along the way, you probably win the Alabama and you definitely win Saturday against Texas Tech. You can see Hudson Card getting better. It's slow. It's not at a rapid rate, but think about the way Hudson Card looked against Louisiana Monroe. Now think about the way that he's looking, 9 quarters later, 10 quarters later, from the third quarter of 11 quarters later. You can see that he's starting to make the progress from, oh man, you don't want that guy on the field, to he's actually okay. Had you bitten that bullet last year and not given up on your young quarterback as a freshman, as a sophomore, I think he's much more advanced. Where he is right now, he could have been there last year, meaning that as he moves forward, just like Quinn Ewers, the more reps, the better he's going to be. I think you go back to last year, and it was just I think Sarkisian made a bad mistake. I think you don't play a freshman quarterback if you're going to yank him out of the lineup the first time he has a bad game. They better not do that with Quinn Ewers. And I just think that I watched that game on Saturday, and I was like, God, Hudson Card felt this close to being a really good player. He needs a little bit more. He's still late on throws. Like you think about that Jordan Whittington play along the sideline in the fourth quarter. It was open. He was like half a second late in throwing it, and by the time the ball got there, Whittington was out of bounds. But he's making reads. He's making plays. He's clearly got some guts. And I just feel like I watched that game on Saturday, and had they dedicated last season a little bit more to Hudson Card, you're a better team right now because of it. Even if he's not your everyday starter, you have a player who finishes a game like that in Lubbock against Texas Tech.
So you're saying he panicked?
He did. I said that last year. I mean, why you don't start a freshman? It's a little bit like the defensive coordinator thing. If you have to fire your defensive coordinator early into the season at the first sign of trouble, then that needed to happen in the first place. If you are deciding, and this goes with Quinn as well, if you're deciding to play a super young player at quarterback, you have to bake in, there are going to be some days that mama warned you about. And when they happen, you don't quit the kid. You're the head coach, and your specialty is offense. You make him better. And I can see Hudson Card on Saturday with more playing time becoming a better player somewhere. Probably won't be at Texas, somewhere. And I thought to myself, man, if that guy had 8 to 10 more games of experience from a year ago, and if he's still not good enough to beat Quinn Ewers, that's okay. But as your backup quarterback, he would be a much more proven and better player, and you wouldn't have to do things like, I think, limit the offense sometimes. We've seen last week, I didn't think the Tech offensive game plan was anywhere near like the UTSA game plan. They opened it up a little bit more. They weren't completely playing in a phone booth. You just wouldn't be this restricted if you'd made the investment that you needed a year ago, instead of having to do it now when you had previously had time to do it and you didn't.
I don't know what to say to that.
We can move on. Like I just want to say,
I want to. It's interesting overreaction. I'm not quite sure. At that point, he did look better at points.
He's getting better.
Correct. Now, here's the thing. I don't think the offense was that productive in the second half against Texas Tech. And so some of that is going to be on him. But if you're talking about a QB rating standpoint, he only had really one bad pass, which was the interception that floated. It may have landed by now. But he did have that. Didn't lose because of him per se, but the offense didn't really do anything great because of him. Now, it's not just because of him. Obviously, the offensive line had some issues.
But I'm saying if you invested in him last year, that's probably, I can't say with 100% certainty, but we're watching a guy get better. So that stands to reason that he would have gotten better over time last year, and that a player – it's what I expect of Quinn Ewers. I expect as Quinn Ewers mixes in games and plays on the road. And, that was Hudson Card's first career start on the road in the Big 12. Like, once you get your firsts out of the way and do all of those things, I think a player gets better and learns from it. It's what I expect of Quinn. I'm pointing to the same thing with Hudson. They got nothing out of last season that they needed to ultimately. It's a wasted year. And, maybe they don't get Quinn Ewers if they invest that much in Hudson Card. So, I totally get that. But you can see Hudson Card growing as a player in a pretty short window of opportunity. Right? He's played 10 quarters since that La Monroe game. He's played 10 quarters. And you can see a guy that, look, he made enough improvement that he gave the team a chance to win against Alabama. He beats UTSA. And he put that team – Quinn Ewers almost single-handedly got that game to overtime. I mean, if that had been Sam Ehlinger that had made those 3 throws to eliminate a loss and potentially set up a win, people would be going, gaga. So I point to little things like that and not say Hudson Card needs to be the starter over Quinn Ewers. No, not even close. I'm pointing to you would not have believed that Card had it in him to make those throws 2 weeks ago. You can see him getting better. And I think this program is worse off because a year ago, Sarkisian didn't make the investment in Card that he needed. At the very least, you'd have a much better backup quarterback this year, and maybe you're not 2-2 in the process.
Okay, fair enough. What else you got? I got a question for you. If you know. Okay, eight games left, right? And in order for them to go 8-4, they've got to win 6 out of 8. So we're talking a 6-2 record over the next 8 games. Where's your confidence level at? I know you said 8-4, you were going to stick with it, but when I outlined that they've got to go 6-2, so only 2 more you can see on dropping. What's your confidence level that can happen?
My confidence level that it can happen is fairly high.
Okay.
Will it's pretty shaky. I mean, honestly. The thing is, the schedule looks different today than it did a month ago. Playing at Kansas at the end of the year feels dicey at this moment. Because I'll just tell Texas fans, if you have not seen Jalen Daniels play yet, and of course you did, you watched him a year ago in Austin, that dude is on another level right now. And if you think Texas had problems with Donovan Smith, wait till you get a load of this dude this year. That the game in Manhattan suddenly, I mean, that's the game I'm chalking up as a Texas win. But if you saw Kansas State on Saturday in Norman, you wouldn't say, oh, well, they're definitely going to lose to Texas. It really is at any given Saturday league right now, which means a lot of 50-50 games. It means a lot of fourth quarter games. And what it will mean in order for Texas to go 6-2 the rest of the way is that they have to stop breaking like Joey McGuire said they will in the fourth quarter in future games. Because of the 8 remaining games they have, I'd probably wager that 6 of them are fourth quarter games. I mean, and by almost definition, fourth quarter games that are 50-50 affairs, you win some, you lose some. Texas would have to do much better in 50-50 games than we've seen possible from them. They would have to win 75-80% of their fourth quarter 50-50 games to get to 8-4. That feels mathematically difficult to expect. But, I think you hope that Quinn Ewers makes this team better. You hope that the thing that somewhat bothers me about the weight being put on Quinn Ewers is I always expected this to be a season with some extreme highs with Ewers and some not so good moments maybe on the road with him as well. And that's what it's like to be a freshman quarterback. No matter how great you are, typically you can be sensational one week and then a defense throws something at you that you've never seen before and you struggle a little bit. And this Texas football program is not good enough to lift Quinn Ewers up if he's struggling. I think we know that. I looked it up. We hadn't had a lot of – if he misses the game in Lubbock, which means his first career start on the road in the Big 12 will be in Stillwater. That's not ideal. And then the very next week, they're on the road at Kansas State. That's an interesting little 2-game patch, that with young quarterback play, I wonder how that's going to go. That doesn't include the Kansas game. You feel like Iowa State's a win. I don't know what the hell to think of Baylor. Baylor's at least as good as Texas Tech. So
they're ranked 15th in the country right now. For what if you care about rankings, if just looking it up, if you care about rankings, Baylor's 15, Oklahoma's 18, and K-State's 25.
The rankings suck. One of the things about Oklahoma State is they've got one of the worst defenses in the country. It hasn't been a problem yet because they haven't played anybody. It will be interesting. But the thing that you always expect of Gundy is that he will help his team. He will guide them through a season and they will improve. It's the thing that I'm demanding of Sarkisian today. Like, be a part of the thing that truly gets this team over the hump. Don't let this, coaches that have great, they never say it at Alabama that any one player is what they need in order to win a game. They expect great coaching because they've seen it time and time again. I don't want to repeat myself and just be a broken record, but it's just an area that Steve Sarkisian just needs to get a lot better in.
So let me ask you this. So the will versus can, right? You're right there. What if I said, okay, I'll give you a get out of jail free card right now. Okay. Oh. And instead of 8-4, and I'm saying I won't hold you to that. And I'll give you 7-5 winning instead of going 6-2. So, so I'll give you 7-5. So that's 5 out of 8. Would your confidence level, would you say, what, I'll take that? I'll feel much better about that one. It finishing 7-5 than I do 8-4. 5 out of 8. Would you take that one?
No. And let me tell you why. Not because maybe it's smart, not because it's more reasonable. Sark goes 7-5 in year 2. It ain't happening, man. It just ain't. I mean, he's either really, really good or he's not. And if we're, people like to point out, like Mac Brown, it took him 6 years at Texas in order to win a championship. And it's like, well, yeah, no, that's true. But he literally went on the road and beat number 1 Nebraska in his first season. He beat Oklahoma. He beat A&M in his first year. And then, along the way, he was knocking out 10 wins a season every year to such a degree that it was a joke. It's like, oh, Mac and his 10-win seasons. Sarkisian, the thing that scares me, man, is that he's just been a guy everywhere he's been. And if he's the guy, it has to start showing up. We can't get to year 3 and that dude's record be just a couple of games better than Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong's the worst coach in the history of the Texas football program from a 1-loss record standpoint. But from a winning percentage standpoint, Sark's right there with him right now. And all 7-5 does is get them to 500 through 2 years. And I think about why you said you fired Tom Herman. And people won't want to admit it because it's a tough thing to admit. Everybody wants – I'm sticking with 8-4 because I want Sark to succeed. I want this program to win games. Our website needs this team to be good like a 40-year-old virgin needs a woman to say yes. We need some consistently good things to smile over. I am all in on this team being better. But if we're talking about the things that our eyes and our brain are looking at, look, I was 2 games into the Charlie Strong era, and I was like, uh-oh. That UCLA game, I was like, final 5 minutes of that game, Charlie Strong did not know what he's doing. Now, Steve Sarkisian's not in
You
charge.
called him the Michael Scott of coaching.
I've always felt like that may be one of my better nicknames ever.
Yes, I remember it. Of all your nicknames, I still remember
we were at
it.
Pluckers when that came out, weren't we?
I think so. We used to go every week.
I just think that, no, I won't take 7-5 because I really feel like 7-5, deep down in my soul of souls, I would know what that means, and it's not good. And, I know what that feels like on the website when, like, you have to run out the string and he has to get a 3rd year and he has to get a 4th year. It shouldn't take till year 3 before we really start to see Steve Sarkisian be an excellent head football coach. And he just isn't that right now. And that's not my – if records matter at all, Anwar, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if we point to guys and say, well, why is Tom Brady the greatest quarterback that ever played? Because he just won a bunch. And he won a bunch of Super Bowls, and championships matter, and making the playoffs matter, and having winning seasons matters. If the records mean anything, then you just can't point to what Steve Sarkisian has done through 16 games and say he's been anywhere near excellent.
All right, so let's do this. Blake, I know you're there. You're listening. I want you to put up a poll. Blake always does this in Drunk Onk. Give me most likely, record scenario, Longhorn record scenario. Blake, give him 4 options. Give him 9-3, 8-4, 7-5, 6-6. Let's see what everyone's in the chat. We got about 500 people in here. I'm curious to see the pulse of the fan base and how many people are going to cling to 8-4, how many people are going to say 7-5, and how many people are going to just say, I'll take 6-6 and be happy. Which we're not going to go past that because that's just death, doom, and destruction. So, but Blake, put that in the chat. I'm just kind of curious. 9-3, 8-4, 7-5, 6-6.
I think it's funny while we wait for that. You see, okay, he said it's up. I don't see it, but maybe because we're in Restream and that's why we can't see it.
Probably, I'm sure. Let me see. Let me click on our show. Let me see if I can see it here. Yeah, it's in the show. I can see it right now. And the votes is definitely starting to come in.
It's funny to me though. Like I saw somebody. Okay, so well, it's pretty even. What 14% at this point say 9-3, 29%. We're saying 8-4. It just disappeared on me. I don't know why it disappeared. But basically, more than 50% believe it'll be 7-5 or worse. More like 60%. Yeah, about 60% believe it'll be 7-5 or 6-6. Wow, how things change in a week. It's funny. I was saying Batman, aka 817, I think was the guy's username. Let me see if I can find that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was basically saying that I'm being over dramatic, and it's like, what am I being over dramatic about? Like, what part of losing is over dramatic? And the thing is, we haven't even gotten into conversations yet. It's probably for later in the week, but like there are personnel concerns. The interior of that offensive line is being found out a little bit as the weeks go by. And Saturday Tech gave them more problems than Alabama did. And I think that's about film. I think that's about getting scouting reports on players and finding out what their weaknesses are. They'll play a better defensive line against West Virginia this weekend than they will have had played Saturday against Texas Tech. I think you look at the pass rush. Texas is not consistently getting to the quarterback. They're not making plays on defense. They're not turning the ball over. Only 2 teams in the country have turned the ball turn teams over less than Texas. This isn't me being overly dramatic. It's not even an overreaction. It's literally talking about what's happening. And a week ago, I was warning people about the defense. And people were like, oh, catch us, Mr. Negativity. Remember all the things that were being said in the chat? And
we had 1,000 comments, and I'm pretty sure 950 were saying you were absolutely dead wrong.
They were just saying I'm crazy. And I'm like, well, I want to be wrong, but like the underlying numbers suggest that there's some real problems there that still exist. And then a week later, 60% of the people in chat don't think this team's going better than 7-5. And this isn't even overreactions, people. This is talking about what's happening in real time. And it's uncomfortable. It's not fun. Look, Anwar and I would have loved for Texas to win that game in overtime on Saturday and show up. And let's just talk about a ranked football team that's 3-1 and making small but positive strides. We'd love to have done that. It'd be awesome to show up and go, you know what, Anwar? Guess what happened on Saturday? The team found itself in the deep waters against Texas Tech, and they didn't drown. That's exactly the type of win they needed to have. That's a sign that they're making progress. Texas Tech probably thought that if you took them into the deep waters, they would drown, but Texas didn't drown. They swam. That's the show we want to do. So, no, I will not listen to, you guys are just overreacting. You guys are being overly dramatic. Man, there ain't nothing over dramatic about 7-9 through 16 games. Because if I told L-Type before he made the decision, yo, just so you know, if you hire Sarkisian, they go 7-9 in the first 16 games. They don't even give Sarkisian an interview. This is not what they signed up for. This is not what they hired him to do. And I have been doing this for 20 plus years. This is who I am. You want to know why I'm never the favorite of any head coach who's ever been here? Tom didn't love me, did he, Anwar?
No, he did not.
I wouldn't say that Charlie loved me, although I would say Charlie might have been indifferent.
Maybe at the end he did, but definitely not to start off with.
And look, Mac Brown probably still has nightmares about me. What you get from me through championship seasons and non-championship seasons is me living in a reality where my lips aren't puckered up to the coach's backside. And right now, it's just not good enough. This isn't good enough. This is not, I'm just telling you right now, L-Type did not make the decision to hire Steve Sarkisian to go 7-9 in the first 16 games. And I'm sure if you were to get him on the record right now, he would tell you that he believes in the future of the program and the recruiting's going well, and you got to give a guy time. Yeah, I mean, you say all the things you have to say to sleep at night. But if I told him 7-9 in the first 16 games and the record against major college opponents and the 6-game losing streak a year ago, they would not have made that hire. Mm-hmm. So it's time for Steve Sarkisian to be performing at a level that's significantly higher than it's been. And that's not an overreaction. And it's like, here's Batman Forever. This takes time, not for great coaches. It doesn't. Lance Leipold at Kansas, kind of the same thing. Dave Aranda at Baylor, the Kansas State coach this year. Like, that's just in the Big 12. Come on, guys. Stop enabling bad play. You did this with Charlie. I'm going to point that out. They did this with Charlie. Charlie's heaping out evidence that he's not good enough. And it was like, well, he's a nice guy. Give him time. He just needs more time. This stuff takes time. No. He took over a Texas team that won 9 games under Mac Brown and they went below 500. Sarkisian took over a program that Tom Herman had ranked higher in his last season at the end of the year, higher than other than one team. It was the second highest rated team in over a decade. They fired him. And the guy that came in isn't winning games remotely near that level. Tom Herman doesn't lose that game in Lubbock, folks. You know how I know that? Because Tom Herman didn't lose in Lubbock.
Yeah, even when they were mathematically supposed to lose. So
yes, in fact, how many times did Charlie Strong lose in Lubbock?
Shoot,
I mean, the last time was 2008.
Yeah. I don't think he did either.
This was a game that previous coaches win, and you'll forgive me if for me the bottom line is always the Buck. Hey, when Anwar and I make mistakes, you don't see us say, "Well, we got to make a lot of opinions and cut us some slack," and the buck stops with us.
Yeah,
we get something wrong, we got it wrong. All right, I'm done. My overreaction. I got into overreaction territory there.
I like it. Hey, we were getting towards the end, and this is probably a good spot because I think there's still more meat left on the bone for some other shows this week.
Well, let's do this. Last few super chat questions. Apostle T says teams are stacking the box because they flat out don't fear the deep ball from Card because of his inability to connect on the deep ball. I mean, yes, that's true. And when Worthy's out, they don't respect the receivers at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech wasn't scared of nobody. You know what I mean? And even a hurt Worthy, I think, makes you nervous. They did not believe that Texas could go over the top on them. But when Ewers comes back again, that's something that both of those quarterbacks consistently, not in one quarter, not once, not twice, they have to consistently prove that they can connect on that deep ball. And I think it's a work in progress for both of them. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Apostle T is wrong there. And it's an area that if Hudson Card's ever going to truly be a plus player, it's got to be part of his repertoire. And right now, it's not. Although, man, and I thought it was interesting that Sarkisian called out Jordan Whittington today. He was like, hey, Whittington has to catch that ball.
Mm-hmm.
He's right. And there have been plays that Xavier Worthy should have probably caught and didn't. It's not just the quarterbacks. Everybody on this team's got to play at a slightly different, higher level than they have so far this season. That's part of this team getting better. It's not just the quarterbacks that have to do it. Jake says, I think the difference in Card and Thompson bowl game overshadow him with Ewers. Didn't have a Card-like performance overshadow him to take the Ewers job. I mean, Card was awful last year in the limited amount of time that he had. I mean, yeah, you're right. But I don't think if Hudson Card had the Casey Thompson Alamo Bowl performance, I don't think that would have been enough to make them not pick Quinn.
Yeah, but someone that did point out, like, did Tom actually play with a backup quarterback? And that's why I was just going to point in there. I was like, yeah, he did. It was Casey Thompson, and he broke a record in the Alamo Bowl. So there is something to be said of having a backup quarterback that's ready to go, and he was ready to go in real time, having not played, and all he did was just break Alamo Bowl records that game.
All right, last of the super chats before we sign off. By the way, everybody like the channel right now, or not like the channel, but like this video. Help us get to like a bazillion likes. It helps the YouTube algorithm, helps us out. We do this for you for free. We'd love an occasional thumbs up and definitely subscribe to the channel. I'm just saying. If Sark is 2-4 to start the season, which is a real possibility, what are the chances they fire? None. If they fire Sarkin, none.
Nah.
None.
It's just they're too invested. Like, you got to understand. Like, the couple of things. Like, when Charlie was here, that was a Gary Patterson hire, right? And so when Gary Patterson's no longer here, when I say Gary Patterson, what did I mean to say? Yeah, who was the AD that was there?
Perrin?
No, before Perrin. Who was the guy? Who's the guy everyone hated? I say Gary Patterson, but I think Steve Patterson. Is that that's his name, right? Steve. I say Gary.
I blocked Steve Patterson out of my brain.
Yeah, I think majority of people have, except the people he fired.
I was about to say, except for the people he fired.
All 1,000 of them. So all 1,000 of them probably still hate his ass, and rightfully so. But that was one thing. Then of course Tom gets hired by Mike Perrin, but then Perrin gets replaced, and so there's no loyalty there. this is a Delcani hire, El Taif as well, but this is a Delcani hire, so there's going to be way more invested into his success. And the last thing anyone wants to do is pull the plug on year two, and that would have to be admitting. It would be admitting, not only did you get it wrong, but you screwed up by getting rid of a guy that was at least getting you the bowl games, and at least you would admit that not only you would be. It would be one of the biggest colossal mistakes in UT history, firing a guy with a winning record for a guy who couldn't win. Everyone would look bad. So because of that, he will be given every opportunity for success. These conversations really probably won't be had until 2023, especially if Texas has to go into the SEC by 2024. But zero way that happens this year. Zero. It would have to be something of epic, massive NCAA infraction proportions for something to that happen.
Hey, Anwar, last question before we sign off. Is Saturday a must win?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we know Texas OU is 50-50. At no matter what, we see the bad Texas team beat OU, right? So I would say that. And then, when we look at the games, the road games, like you said, Oklahoma State's on the road. K-State's a tough opponent. Kansas is a tough opponent. Baylor's is looming. There are potentially a couple more losses there. The one thing you can't do is go 2-3 heading into OU. You start talking about getting close to Charlie territory. I think we had something kind of close to that before he pulled off the victory, and of course we got to wear the golden hat and all that other kind of craziness. But yes, it is. You got to win this thing at home. You cannot.
This is one of the easier games on paper the rest of the way. I mean, West Virginia is another. Again, we did that if you rank the 9 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, in any order, the top 5 probably looks like Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Kansas State, Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the 4 beyond that. If you don't include Texas, the 4 that remain are West Virginia, Texas Tech, Iowa State, and TCU. So this is, I think you fairly put West Virginia somewhere between 6 and 8.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if you're really going to have a good season, you got to win this game at home. It is a must win. I agree.
Yeah. I think you cannot go into a coin flip game like that. And I think the one thing that Sark cannot afford is to have any of these guys questioning him too early in the season, because there's still a house of cards that are here. There's still a lot of guys from last year that are still on this team, and there still has to be some proven, like, okay, we 100% believe. And we've seen it when guys start to check out a little bit. It's just tough to get them back. So I would 100%, you got to win this.
All right, look, this has been the Monday Overreaction Show here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm begging you, again, hit the thumbs up, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, tell your mom and your dad and your friends and your 19-year-old cousin who is on YouTube but might not know about the channel. Like, just help us out as we continue to grow this show, brought to you by rogueshop.com. Make sure you use the promo code Orangebloods to get the hookup, the discount that you want for the product that you want, for the needs that you need to have addressed. For myself and Anwar Richardson, who is live on the 40 acres right now at Belmont Hall. Wait a minute. Is that right? Yeah, you guys are at Belmont. You're on like the ninth floor.
Right? Yep, ninth floor. Just
there you go.
Living our best life.
You guys be good to each other. We will see you tomorrow. Later.